Hello, Professor. My name is Rochelle Stanley, and the two general education competencies that I will be elaborating on are reading fluency and written communications. The first general education competency that I will elaborate on is reading fluency. According to the syllabus, reading fluency is the ability to read and understand primary and secondary sources. To demonstrate that I have achieved an understanding of this competency and what it entails, I will use an essay that I wrote in my sophomore year at Westchester Community College. In my introductory paragraph, I demonstrate my ability to evaluate explicit message of the text and its main supporting evidence, and also to explain the possible implications of the text beyond the explicit message. The topic of my essay was the effects of cultural abandonment and racial prejudice. It reads, African beliefs and the use of traditional medicinal practices have been severely neglected and misconstrued. In response to the growing gravitation towards Western beliefs, many African Americans have in turn abandoned their own cultural doctrines. Alice Walker's Strong Horse Tea symbolically portrays the importance of cultural acceptance and the consequence of cultural abandonment. The implications of voodoo and conjure medicine, as portrayed in the story, are not so much relics of a rejected past, but symbolize entrenched values and beliefs that govern one's actions when all else fails. So, my first paragraph demonstrate my ability to evaluate the explicit message of the text, Strong Horse Tea, and use the main supporting evidence that are outlined throughout the text to support my evaluation. To do this, I read the text and evaluated it for my personal understanding of what the text is saying beyond what the text actually said explicitly. I use the choice of words that were used by the characters to arrive at my thesis statement and my conclusion. I will also use my second or supporting paragraph, which will be on the next slide, to further display my understanding of reading fluency by demonstrating how I evaluated the text for significance and relevance as it relates to my thesis statement. The story takes place in the close to dilapidated home of the main character, Rani Toomer, whose child is suffering from double pneumonia and whooping cough. Rani is urged repeatedly by her neighbor Sarah to try some of the old home remedies that were known to cure ailments in the African culture. Sarah is known as the witch of the town and believed to possess extensive knowledge about magic. As such, Rani is completely against trying any of her home remedies and believes it to be witch remedies and not at all effective. We don't need none of your witch remedies. Rani is portrayed to be against traditional African beliefs and leads more towards Western medicinal practices and beliefs. In her words, we're going to have us a real doctor. I don't believe in none of that swamp magic. So, as I said before, my second paragraph demonstrates my ability to evaluate the text for significance and relevance. I chose specific parts of the story to use to demonstrate my idea of what the story is basically saying. Um, the parts of the story that I chose supported my thesis statement. I also analyzed text structure and other textual features that also support my main thesis statement. On the next slide, which is my third paragraph, I display my ability to analyze the structure and features of the text, which I use to support my beliefs about the main character, Rani Toomer, that she has absolutely no faith in her own culture. It reads, Rani's confidence in this white doctor is portrayed throughout the story. What time you reckon that doctor'll get here? White mailman, white doctor. It also highlights her partiality towards whites as opposed to people of her own ethnicity. While she impatiently awaits the arrival of this doctor, she seems to be oblivious to the fact that the doctor will not just simply arrive at her request, owing to her state of finance and her background. Throughout her long wait, Sarah constantly urges her to try some of her home remedies but is repeatedly shut down by Rani in a rude manner. I chose these specific parts of the story because I believe that it demonstrates the main character's distrust as it relates to her own ethnicity and her traditional medicinal practices that were believed to work in her own culture. She constantly displays her disbelief of that her traditional medicinal practices would actually work and lean towards more medicinal Western medicinal practices, and it turned out to work against her favor as her child died in the end, which in the text does not explicitly state that her child would have lived had she tried her home remedies. But if she had tried it, her child would at least lived longer. So the parts of the text that I chose supported my thesis statement that um, African Americans. Let me go back to the slide that states my thesis statement state that Alice Walker's Stronghorse Tea symbolically portrays the importance of cultural acceptance and the consequence of cultural abandonment. The consequence of Rani's cultural abandonment was basically her child dying because she never even gave her traditional medicinal practices a chance, but just relied solely on Western medicinal practices, which left her child dead in the end because they really did not care much about her because of her state of finance. And it also states the implications of voodoo and conjure medicine as portrayed in the story, that they're not so much relics of a rejected past, but symbolize entrenched values and belief that governs one's actions when all else fails. So it's not basically just focusing on um, relics of voodoo, like saying that she rejected voodoo all in all, but it displays that when all else fails, um, people of that culture they eventually turn back to their roots. But when Rani turned back to her roots, it was too late because her child was already too far in the sickness and she ended up dying. So that is the end of my demonstration of my ability to read fluently, of reading fluence, of reading fluency. The next general education competency that I will elaborate on is oral communication. According to the syllabus, oral communications is the ability to comprehend and to speak in standard English with precision and clarity. To demonstrate my ability to communicate orally, I will use a speech that I presented my last fall semester at Mercy College last year. Oral communications also entails a student's ability to create and communicate a compelling central message. To demonstrate my ability to do this, I will use my attention grabber and my thesis statement. My attention grabber was, I don't mean to alarm anyone, but did you know your credit score can cost you thousands over your lifetime? That was compelling. And my thesis statement basically stated a lot of people are either misinformed or completely unaware of how big an impact their credit score has on their life. Almost every substantial achievement that you could think of that occurs throughout your life is directly affected by your credit. So that demonstrated my ability to create and communicate a compelling central message. The following slide will demonstrate my ability to organize a presentation to make the content cohesive and make it flow seamlessly. In order to demonstrate my ability to use a discernible organizational pattern to make my content flow seamlessly, I will be using the same speech that I presented in my last fall semester in a video format to show that I'm able to organize. So I started out with my attention grabber, which I read earlier, followed by my theme, and I proceeded to ask a question, which I answered myself. Then I read my thesis statement and supported my thesis by using a credible source. My credible source also contained statistics, which makes my speech more credible. Then support number one contained like ways that you could build your credit. Support number two contains the 5 major factors that affect your credit score. My support number three is how you could gain access to your credit scores and how to keep a track of your credit scores. Followed by my conclusion. And my conclusion basically summarizes everything that I spoke about throughout my speech, and it also contains a finale. I started out with an attention grabber and I closed off with a finale. So basically, that showed my ability to use a discernible organizational pattern that makes the content of my presentation cohesive. Another factor that demonstrates a student's ability to communicate orally is their ability to select language choices that are appropriate for the audience. So, my choice of language was basically I spoke in English because I was speaking to a group of students, which are my peers and also my professors. So, I spoke in English and I also spoke on a personal level. I did not use speak as if I was speaking in a conference. I spoke in a manner that was relatable by my peers. Communicating orally also entails a student's ability to demonstrate delivery techniques that are appropriate for extemporaneous speaking. So basically, extemporaneous speaking is speaking in a manner that is not like prepared or done, was basically unscripted. The manner in which I spoke when I delivered the speech was extemporaneously. I did not just read from the paper, but I also interjected with examples. I asked questions that did not make the speech seem so scripted. I basically spoke extemporaneously. And lastly, communicating orally includes the student's ability to incorporate a variety of types of relevant, credible supporting materials. My supporting materials, which is on my next slide, was a pie chart. This pie chart basically supported my speech in that it was a visual representation of what I spoke about throughout my speech, which was the 5 factors that affect your credit score. The first one, which is 35% payment history. Basically, I was speaking about, making your payments on time. 30% of how much you owe, not keeping a huge outstanding balance. And 15% the length of your credit history, which is how long have you had credit. Then 10% new credit accounts, which is if you apply for a new credit card. And then the other 10% is the types of credit you have. The more credit you have is the better for your credit score, not just having one credit card, but also having, in addition to that, an auto loan or mortgage, which helps your credit score. And this slide is basically my works cited page. In conclusion, I spoke about the two general education competency of reading fluency and oral communication. Demonstrating my reading fluency ability, I used a sample of an essay that I wrote in my sophomore year of college on Alice Walker's Strong Horse Tea. During this, I demonstrated my ability to evaluate the explicit message of a text and its main supporting elements. I also explained the possible implications of the text beyond its explicit message, which was what I spoke about when I used supporting evidence from the text to um, support my thesis statement. It also entails a student's ability to evaluate the text for significance and relevance and to analyze the text structure and other textual features, which I use various spoken words throughout the text to support my thesis statement. And also, I demonstrated my ability to communicate orally. And as I stated before, oral communication involves the student's ability to comprehend and to speak in standard English with precision and clarity. So, even me speaking about these two general education competency demonstrates my ability to communicate orally, and it also entails the student's ability to create and communicate a compelling central message, which I showed as an example my central message for the speech that I presented my last fall semester. My attention grabber and my thesis statement demonstrate my ability to do this. I also demonstrated my ability to use a discernible organizational pattern that makes the content of my presentation cohesive. I showed the outline of my speech, which demonstrated my ability to do this. And of course, my outline helped me to flow seamlessly instead of being standing up there not knowing what to say next. I also used a language choice that was appropriate for my audience, which I spoke in standard English and I spoke in a manner that was relatable to my peers. I also demonstrated delivery techniques that were appropriate for extemporaneous speaking. I did not go up there like a robot. I spoke extemporaneously. I interjected with questions, gave them examples, and lastly, I incorporated a variety of types of relevant, credible supporting materials. My supporting materials was my pie chart, which demonstrate the 5 factors that affect an individual credit scores. Thank you for listening. This is the end of my presentation. I do hope you have a wonderful night or day. Thank you.